Chinese officials said today they're working to identify the 39 people found dead in a truck in the UK this week. Police discovered the bodies of 8 women and 31 men in the back of a refrigerated trailer in Essex on Wednesday. Most are believed to be Chinese nationals. Pippa Mills is Deputy Chief Constable with the Essex Police.
This matter has attracted national and international interest, and it's absolutely imperative that the operation is conducted with the utmost respect for the 39 people who've lost their lives.
The case has renewed concerns over human trafficking, although the details of this case are not yet known. And for more, we're joined now by Stephanie Hepburn, journalist and co-author of the book Human Trafficking Around the World, Hidden in Plain Sight. Stephanie, we don't know whether the people in the back of this truck were smuggled or were being trafficked, but what is the difference between the two?
That's a great question. So the crux of human trafficking is really deprivation of freedom, and that deprivation being done for an exploitative purpose. And right now we don't know about an exploitative purpose. So we do know that people were transported and that tragedy occurred and that they died, and we don't really even know how they died, if it was suffocation or if it was the temperature was so low that they died that way. But, like I said, there's so many more questions than answers. But what we do know is that when it comes to human trafficking, the crux of it is really that deprivation of freedom happens for an exploitative purpose.
Like what?
So that can be, in my mind, that's forced labor. And that forced labor can be for the purposes of commercial sexual exploitation. It can be for domestic labor. It can be for forced agricultural labor. It can be for any type of labor that somebody signed on to do, oftentimes, but their freedom is deprived, meaning they are unable to move. Whether that's they're not paid, whether their identifying documentation is withheld. There's so many different ways that can transpire. And over the years, we've learned more and more about what coercion looks like.
But if somebody is being trafficked, do they have any sense in the beginning, if you say they may have signed on to coming in to do labor of some kind, do they have any sense of the risks that are involved with that? And they think, well, I'm in such a desperate situation, I have to just take this risk? Or do they think it's going to be easier or less risky than it ends up being?
I think that's an excellent question. I think that's a gray zone. I think many people know, we're talking, and I think the highlighting of desperation is immensely critical because when you are in a desperate situation, whether you're marginalized or there's civil unrest, or, I live in New Orleans, whether there is a hurricane that has ravaged the city, leaving a disrupted infrastructure and a sudden demand for low-cost labor, you have scenarios where certainly people are cognizant that there are some risks, but you have unscrupulous people who are good at conveying opportunity. And when people are desperate, opportunity sounds pretty good. So I think it's some combination of those two. I think people are aware that there are risks and they're willing to take those risks because they're desperate.
Whose responsibility is it to stop this kind of trafficking?
So I think that's very layered. I think that we as a society need to be more cognizant of it. I think we need to realize that this is not an other issue, meaning a problem that's happening elsewhere, so not our problem. So I think it needs to be addressed on the local level. There needs to be policy that's passed. I think when we're looking at supply chain transparency, making sure that, what happens in that chain, what happens, when we're following that thread along the way, to make sure that people are treated right.
Were you surprised that that truck was obviously able to make it across borders, potentially
Right.
with so many people in the back, and not be discovered along the way?
Yeah, what I read was that because it's a refrigerated vehicle, they need to just make sure that it was closed properly. And I think what you're highlighting is points of vulnerability. And that's exactly right. And when we're talking about the supply chain, that's those points are exactly where we need to press to make sure that people aren't vulnerable and that their harm is not coming to them, and that there are checkpoints, like you said.
Stephanie, do you think that it's possible, or likely even, that right now as we speak, there's a truck just like that driving around the United States with people in the back of it that nobody knows about?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that we see this over and over again. It doesn't matter whether you're in the UK, whether you're in China, whether you're in the United States. People are desperate for a better situation. And there are going to be unscrupulous people who step into that space and take advantage. And I fully think that that is happening at this moment.
That is Stephanie Hepburn, who is a journalist and co-author of the book Human Trafficking Around the World, Hidden in Plain Sight. Stephanie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.